Tina Payne Bryson is the author of The Bottom Line for Baby and the co-author with Dan Siegel of The Yes Brain, The Power of Showing Up, as well as 2 New York Times bestsellers, The Whole Brain Child and No Drama Discipline, each of which has been translated into over 50 languages. She is the founder and executive director of the Center for Connection, a multidisciplinary clinical practice in Southern California. Dr. Bryson keynotes conferences and conducts workshops for parents, educators, and clinicians all over the world, and she frequently consults with schools, businesses, and other organizations. An LCSW, Tina is a graduate of Baylor University with a PhD from USC. And if you don't know Dr. Tina Bryson's work, please look up her books. She has informed so much of my parenting, and I just can't thank her enough for all of the hours and time it has taken to put out these amazing books. And I just can't recommend her enough. I've been looking forward to this interview for months, and I'm so thankful for Tina for her time. You guys, this is a good one, and if you are a new parent or even thinking about having children, I would start reading these books and practicing on your spouse, because these techniques are revolutionary, and she is spearheading the change in parenting that we are now seeing all over the internet, and she has been for a decade. So thank you, Dr. Tina Bryson, for being on the show. I'm so excited for our conversation. Tina, now that we're starting the podcast, after 20 minutes of getting to really know each other and instant best friends, yes, I have to thank you for coming on the podcast. It would surprise me if our listeners, especially if their parents don't know your work, from the Whole Brain Child to No Drama Discipline, the Yes Brain. The workbooks, the Power of Showing Up. I am a super fan. I've read all your books. I've stalked, your inbox trying to get you on this podcast. You were the first, children's therapist and expert that I can't gush enough. I've loved your work from the very, very, very beginning. You definitely were the first to share this message and to get it out there that the power of showing up is the most important thing we can do as parents, naming emotions, being regulated as parents while our children are dysregulated, creating a safe space, working on relationships. I could go on and on and on. And I want to unpack this for parents because your tools are definitely just the most actionable, and they make me feel like a good mom. So I want to thank you for all of your work. I know how long it takes. I know how much effort goes into writing a book, and I know I've written a few. We've written 5 plus workbooks. So thank you. And thank you for being here. I'm so excited to have you on. And as a mom of boys, we're just so many reasons why I love you.
Oh my gosh. What a nice introduction. Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here. You're so amazing in the world. So this will be a really fun conversation. I think, everything I talk about, even if you're listening, you're not a parent, everything I talk about is based on the science of relationships and the impact they have on our brain and nervous system. So really everything I talk about, even if I'm talking about a tantrum with a 3-year-old who won't get out of the bathtub, apply it to your boss who is having a fit about something, apply it to your romantic partner who's having a meltdown about whatever. So everything can be applied to really any of our relationships. So I hope even those of you who aren't parents will find some good nuggets today. And I can't wait to talk to you about all things.
Okay. Well, I will say, you make a good point, because if I had or read your books before Chris and I had Sebastian, our first child, it would have worked really well, because we've already started implementing the things that you taught to each other. I see that you're upset, Chris. I would feel that way too. And then instead of being buck up, buddy, we're parents, figure it out.
I will say though, I've been married 27 and a half years, and I got married very young, and fortunately it worked. Even though my brain wasn't developed yet when I made that decision, we ended up being really compatible, and we work hard at the relationship. But I will say it doesn't go so well for Scott when he quotes one of my strategies to me, when he's I'm I'm trying to solve something, and he's like, wait, can you just connect with me before you redirect? And I'm like, don't, that does not go well. So, you know what? Sometimes knowing the approaches and the things doesn't always mean you use them, but that's just part of being human too, right? Nobody wants to be perfect.
Definitely. No, we do want to preserve our relationships though. And your tools help. So in interest of getting the audience who haven't read your books, or if they've read the books and want the refresher, your first book was The Whole Brain Child, and then there was No Drama Discipline. But can we talk about, you just mentioned that your brain wasn't fully developed. Can we talk about children and their developmental milestones and why it's so important to connect before we correct, and to understand how to name their emotions for them, and support them through this, like the first 4 to 5 years of life?
Oh my gosh, that's a huge question and I love it. Okay, here's the thing. Ross Greene many years ago said, kids do well when they can. And I love that phrase so much, because as a society, we often, we're wrong about a lot of things when it comes to seeing and responding to children's behaviors. It's a lot of it based on really old research that was primarily done on animals. And now that we know more about the developing brain and the nervous system, we can really come to see that the experiences kids have, the repeated experiences they have, really do impact how their brains get developed. But that doesn't mean all the pressure has to be on us as parents, because they have a lot of experiences in the world as well. And one thing that I think is really liberating for us as parents is to know that, even like if you think about something that you're worried about your child, or a behavior that's driving you crazy, or whatever's going on right now, that even if you don't do anything in terms of intervention or using a strategy, just your child's brain development unfolding will make them more resilient, will make them be better able to make decisions, all of those things, because we really can trust development. As the brain develops and unfolds, it gets better and better and better. So like, let me just give a quick example and then I'll get back to the connecting part. And that is, like, for example, a lot of people don't know that around the age of 4 or 5, kids tend to have another big surge of separation anxiety, right? So we're familiar with separation anxiety, often in kind of later of the first year of life and into the toddler years. They really just want people, most kids really just want people they're familiar with, and they may cry when you leave, these kinds of things. But when it happens again at age 4 or 5, parents are like, oh no, and they start to worry their child has something wrong with them. But what we can come to understand is that around age 4 or 5, they have this huge burst of cognitive development that allows them to imagine scarier things happening, right? So now they have this amazing imaginative brain that can imagine something scary happens if they go into the bathroom by themselves without you there with them. But they don't have the emotional regulation capacity to manage those new thoughts and those new abilities. So it's really healthy and normal for them to have it. It's a sign of good development unfolding. When we understand that their behaviors happen because of where they are in development, because of what state they're in that moment, in their little nervous systems, we can look at any kind of behavior, whether it's a tantrum falling apart kind of thing, might even come out as oppositional, yelling at you, I hate you, you're so stupid. It might be aggression toward a sibling. It might be whatever it is. That in those moments, we can say, look, when my child is in a regulated state and their brain is in an integrated state, they do handle themselves well. And when they are at their worst, that is when they most need connection. And without going, we could talk about this for hours, but let me lay it out just simply here in a very, very shortcutted way. And that is that if we want our children to become self-disciplined humans who are great in the world and handle themselves well, they have to have a lot of learning along the way in order to do that. So when we think about challenging behaviors like tantrums, disrespect, irresponsibility, etc. And I can give you lots of examples from my own family.
I can give you a couple too. Yeah.
That when we see those moments, it's not like in the moment I'm like, oh, how great, my kid's throwing a fit about having to go to bed. I'm not in that moment thinking, what a wonderful opportunity to build his brain. I'm not. I'm going, are you effing kidding me? Just, I'm so tired, go to bed, right?
Yeah.
But truly, if we have this perspective that each experience we're providing to kids, which don't have to be perfect, is part of like when you think about lifting weights, you do reps, right? Every rep you do makes your muscles stronger. That's how it is with experiences with the brain. So each time I can give my kid a rep to practice a skill, to learn something new, to think about another solution or another approach to handling big anger instead of hitting his brother. Anytime I do those things, I'm building the brain. But my kid, let's say it this way, the brain is either in a receptive state in which it can learn and build skills, or it's in a reactive state. And I know I'm keep doing more and more side notes, but I have to also say the brain is embodied. It's part of the nervous system. So really, anytime I say the word brain, I don't mean just the organ in your skull. I mean, it's part of the whole nervous system. So anytime our kids are dysregulated, they're in a reactive state where they actually can't learn very well. So one of the reasons we connect with them from a really strategic point of view, and there's lots of other reasons to do it as well. It builds relationship. It feels good to us. That's our purpose as mammals, et cetera, et cetera. That's all the attachment stuff. But in the interest of helping your child become a self-disciplined person who handles them well, when we connect, when we are present in the moment, we help our child calm down, we bring empathy and connection to them, it actually settles their whole nervous system and moves their brain and nervous system into a receptive state in which they can learn. And that's when we can do skill building to help them get those reps to become the person they're meant to be.
I love that analogy because I love a goal and I love looking at things in a different way, like finding the silver lining and saying, okay, this is what I'm going to do to feel like what you said, like a productive mom, you don't want to feel like you're constantly saying no. You don't want to feel like you're constantly shutting things down and creating a dysregulated state in your child. So can we run through a couple of examples? Because I think you're always so good at this. So Sebastian, well, he's closer to 4. He's going to be 4 in 12 days, actually.
Amazing.
So, and it's such a fun age and we're having a great time. We didn't do screens for the first 18 months of his life. We had the ability to do that. It was really fun and nice. We started introducing, some Sesame Street and things of that nature. We're at almost 4. He has some of the cartoons I don't love that are a little faster. I'm like, someone turn Paw Patrol off. But we give him a little bit of cartoons. It doesn't matter. It's like any single time that we end cartoons, it is an absolute puddle of tears to like trying to grab the pillow that's behind him and throw it at me. I mean, he doesn't hit. He's not he doesn't normally show up in an aggressive way. And now there are words behind it. Like, I'm going to give you an X. I X you. I'm like, first of all, trying not to laugh because I'm like, that's really cute. You could say a lot meaner things.
Yeah, they have great creative insults. I remember one time my 4-year-old was like, I'm going to hide all your shoes. And I'm like, okay. Like that was the worst thing he could think of to do to me.
It's sweet. And you're like, sometimes Chris and I have to like hold back not to laugh because that's going to dysregulate him even more. Obviously, it's not going to like that. No one likes being laughed at when they're upset. Like Chris gets really upset if I laugh when he's mad.
Yeah. Understandable.
How I normally will 2 minutes before it's going to be over, I'll go, hey, bud, and he's so tranced. And I'm like, hey, bud. And I'm even standing in front of the TV, last 2 minutes, just a little nudge, just reminding you, like, it's always hard, but I can't figure out how to get through this. And I'm like, if you're telling me this developmentally will work itself out, great, and I can handle the dysregulation. I know you don't mean that. It's okay. I'd be frustrated to turn off the TV too. Like the talk track is there, but it's every damn time. Help.
Okay. So yes, I'm telling you that even if you don't do anything different, if you just get through it, development will unfold. When he's 12, he won't cry when you turn off the TV. I promise you. If he does, you call me and we'll figure it out.
Okay.
But that's not going to be the case. And and I'm going to give you some practical strategies too, because we don't just have to wait for development. In fact, we shouldn't just wait for development because all of those moments are opportunities to help him build skills and to build the relationship. So I'm going to give you some strategies, but I want to say too that, you don't have to handle it perfectly all the time. You can even get really frustrated with him and then make the repair, right? So just like with reps, if you decide to take a day off, it's okay. You don't have to do it perfectly every single time. In fact, parents are driving themselves crazy right now thinking oh my gosh, I just said to my kid, good job. Like now I've ruined them forever. Like that is not the case. Like what is their more, their general experience. Okay. So we can trust development to unfold. We can do this. And we can do things in the moment to help him. Now, there are a million ways to handle this, and it'll depend so much on, and I usually am not super prescriptive, like do A, B, C in this order and say these exact words. I can do that, and we're going to do some of that, but I never want people to think of them as scripts. I know a lot of people are like, give me a script, or I'm going to give you a script. The problem with that is, and it's helpful to have phrases in our pockets that we can pull out, very helpful, but you need to tune into your kid in the moment. Right? So if you know he's hungry, probably nothing you're going to say is going to, if his blood sugar's low, right?
Yeah.
So it's really about reading the cues like, oh, he's actually had a million meltdowns already today. And so I just need to comfort him and not do any intentional skill building right now, although comforting is skill building. And I'll talk about that too. But otherwise, you might look at him and be like, you know what? I can challenge him a little bit more today. Like I can do a little bit more pushing instead of more cushion, given the circumstances and what the day's been like for him and how much sleep he got. We really want to be tuned into our kid. Now, there are two ways to think about how the brain processes information. One is top down and one is bottom up. Okay, top down processing is where we use our cortex, which is our thinking brain, right? This is where we do problem solving and we use words and we are naming our feelings and we're doing all those things. That is a really important, helpful way of processing information. So that would be like, for instance, in the Whole Brain Child, we talk about name it to tame it, based on a bunch of science about when we accurately name what we're feeling, it can settle the brain. So that's a great way to do that. You say, oh, buddy, you're so disappointed the show is over. It's so hard when it ends. I know. And so you're helping him give words. You're helping him. Are you feeling mad? Yeah, you're mad. We understand, right? So that's a top-down strategy. And when we think about the brain, so at the top is the cortex, this is our thinking brain. In the middle of our brain is kind of our limbic region. And then of course we have our brainstem and our whole nervous system, our body. So top-down processing changes thoughts, words, problem-solving thinking, hoping to impact emotions, and then his body being relaxed and not tense with anger and all of that, right? Bottom-up processing is actually the other way. So it's really more using our body, our sensory system, how we breathe. And when we do that and we shift something there, it can impact emotion. Emotion's not just midbrain limbic, it's actually throughout the whole body and the whole brain, but typically that's where like the main center is that kind of processes that. Then he can change like, oh, I got really mad earlier. And, so bottom up is really using the body, the sensory system, breathing, etc. When kids are dysregulated, and particularly when they're young and dysregulated, bottom-up strategies can be really helpful. And we sort of forget about them. We often do too much talking and lecturing and problem solving and too many words, particularly if you have a kid who gets overwhelmed with sensory information. So let's talk about two ways to do that. Is exactly what you're talking about. Giving him the warning, knowing that you're going to help him make sense of that experience. And when you say, I know it's so frustrating, keep in mind, you can say no to a behavior while still saying yes to your child and yes to his experiences. So you're saying, no, we're not going to keep watching TV, but I'm right here with you. Yes, this is so hard for you. You're feeling really mad. The show's over. You're so disappointed. You don't get any more minutes watching, right? And so you can do that. And you're just there with him, helping him name it. That's great. A more bottom-up kind of thing, and then let me give it an interim. An interim would be, you say to him, because he's 4, 4-year-olds are brilliant. Really are. They're kind of actually, I think, one of the hardest ages, honestly, because cognitively, they're super sophisticated, but they have terrible judgment and no emotional breaks yet. Yeah. So they, it's kind of a tough combination. We see that again in adolescence. But 4-year-olds are really tough. So he's brilliant already. You can say to him, and you might have already done this, Kelly, I've noticed that when it's time for the show to be over, it's always really hard for you. And you're not saying this at the time. This is like before the show. This is at a time where he's good, right? He's regulated. Yeah. Have you noticed that too? And you pause and you let him share his experience around it and say, it's so hard, and it's okay when things are hard. I will always be there for you. I will always help you when things are hard. But I'm wondering, do you have any ideas to make it less hard? How can we make it so that it's not so frustrating when it's over? Do you have any ideas? Now, he might come up with something really weird, but he might come up with something brilliant. And you can say, that's interesting. Let's try that. Like if he says, maybe if I sat on the balance ball at the end of the show, when you give me the 2-minute warning, maybe I can try sitting on the balance ball, and that'll remind my body that it's time to get up and start moving in 2 minutes, whatever. Or maybe you help him come up with some of these. So you come out with some top-down strategies to try in the moment. Okay. Now, bottom up would really be touch without as much word. You go up and you hug him if he wants you to. Sometimes touch and hugging is more dysregulating for kids. Or to just go, oh, I know, buddy, I know. So you're not even really using words. You're not naming, you're not solving. You're just, and then you might even say, what do you need? Or how can I help? I'm here, right? And so you're just really providing yourself, giving him some sensory input. And then I would also practice with him ahead of time the longer exhale. So maybe counting in for a number, for 4 and breathing out for 7 or whatever, or box breathing or something else that allows him to use breath, or putting his body in a different posture, some different things that might help. Because when we move our bodies differently with how we breathe or we posture, it actually totally activates different neural networks. So if I were to sit like, with my arms folded and my brows furrowed, if I sat like that for a couple of minutes, I would activate all thoughts, feelings, or whatever connected to that body posture, because our brains are association machines. But if instead, I know I'm going to be frustrated and mad my show's over, instead, I'm going to be a wet, floppy noodle, and I'm going to be really like in a chill posture, that might activate a different neural network. And that would be a bottom-up strategy as well.
Oh, you've always been so good at sharing these examples. I've never thought to talk about, I've learned from you to talk about things in a regulated place outside of dysregulation, thanks to your books. One of the things that Sebastian and I do at the end of the day is we talk about the day. So he'll get upset with me if we don't name, first we went outside with flashlights and we had breakfast, because my kids wake up just way too early. We're working on that, and we'll get to the sleep training in a minute, but they just wake up really early. We just get up with them. And so we'll go through the whole day. And if there's something tricky, we'll talk about that didn't feel good, or that was upsetting, or why do you think that was upsetting? But I love empowering them to come up with a solution, giving him the power, because I did learn from you to give him the power of 2 opposing things. If you don't want to, I remember learning from one of your books that it was give them power. Okay, do you want the broccoli or the asparagus? Not do you want the broccoli or not the broccoli? You want this, yes or no? It was give them something they can choose, and they'll choose something and more likely. And I use that with food with my kids all the time. It's so great. But I love the idea of having him come up with a solution, because he is pretty brilliant. Yeah. I feel and I'm do I just feel that way because I'm his mom? Probably, but also he's very observant. He's definitely in the stage of separation anxiety this year at preschool. And we're wait, you didn't have this last year. Why do you have it this year? You're older now. So that's good to know that that's normal. But I love that. So working a different working it out a different way, and giving him the ability to figure out how to come up with the solution. Because I know he's going to bite at that. Knowing my kid, he's always a problem solver. He always wants to help. He wants to figure it out. He's the big brother,
Love that. Well, and you also are okay. So there's always our explicit messaging. If you say to him, you're a good problem solver and you are the best expert on your body and your feelings, and you might have some ideas for what might work for you, right? So that's the explicit message. You're saying that to him, he's getting that. But there's an implicit message too. There's always this subtext of what we're communicating, sometimes without realizing it, that says I trust you to know yourself and to be able to figure out what you need. That message is getting in there too. I remember when my boys were little, at one point, we always had, they always had to clear their plates and put them in the dishwasher, or there was a period of time we didn't have a dishwasher, so they had to put them in the sink and rinse them even when they were little. But at some point I actually came up with the idea to have them get somebody else's plate. So instead of clearing your own plate, you pick someone else's plate to clear. Now, of course, it created some conflict. Luke never gets my plate, all of that. However, the implicit message with that, the explicit message was, as a family, we help each other. That's what we do. That's what families do. We help each other. We serve each other. We're givers to each other. But they were also getting this implicit message, like, if someone has a plate there and I'm going to the kitchen, like, I can grab their plate, so it gives all these messages. I want to go back to this moment because you're asking, even the question you're asking shows me like what an intentional, regulated mom you are most of the time. But what I want to say is that I think a really common experience is that when we give our kids a privilege, like you get to watch a TV show, or we do something for them and they're not grateful and they get, they're typical kids and get dysregulated, for some reason that activates us even more. And what I think happens is a lot of fear-based parenting. So fear-based parenting is like, my kid will never be able to handle disappointment, right? Or when things don't go his way, he's not going to be able to handle it. And we do these huge leaps where we feel like if our kid is not handling themselves well all the time, which is a totally developmentally inappropriate expectation, that it means that they're going to end up living in a van down by a river and never amount to anything, right? So we have to really watch ourselves. Now, what typically happens is that when particularly we give a privilege, but even other times too, our kid is not getting ready for bed like they're supposed to, or our teenager is really rude to us, or whatever it is, that we often respond by criticizing or minimizing. So you might say to your kid, like, I don't know why you're so mad about the show being over. I let you watch a show and you knew it was coming. So you could immediately go to criticism. Mm-hmm. Or, and you can hear how easily these come out for me, you can minimize, like, I don't know why you're making such a big deal about it. It's just a show. This is what we do every day. So minimizing and criticizing can sound very similar, but you might even just say, like, I don't know why you're crying about drop off today. Like, you love school. Yeah. You weren't sad last year, right? So we kind of were like trying to talk them out of their emotions, and we minimize what they're feeling. Here's the thing we need to know. The brain is an association machine. So, and our nervous system is programmed to go toward what feels good and pleasant, which is why he loves the show. He's getting a good dopamine hit there, and to push away from or turn away from what doesn't feel good or pleasant. Mm-hmm. When my child, so I have this time I had told my kid I was going to take him to the movies, and he asked if he could get movie popcorn. And I said, no, we're not getting movie popcorn. I'll bring you a snack and we'll eat it on the way, a healthy snack on the way to the movie theater. And he started to pout. So I'm immediately pissed. I'm like, I'm taking you to the movies. Do you know how many kids never get to go to the movies? You're so spoiled and entitled. And then my brain jumps to, he's a spoiled, entitled kid and he'll always be terrible. So my immediate response is to want to say, I can't believe you're fussing about that when I'm doing something nice for you. Or why are you making such a big deal about not getting movie popcorn? So if I say things like that, his experience is, wow, I just shared how I felt with my mom. And kids don't share by saying, hey, I'm noticing I'm feeling disappointed because last like, that's not how they share. They share with pouting. Mm-hmm. Or by slamming something down or saying something. That's how he's sharing his emotion with me, because he has an undeveloped brain. And I have to know he's not going to stay that way. So in that moment, he shared with me how he felt. And I responded in a way that felt bad. Mm-hmm. So then he's like, maybe I'm not going to share how I feel with her. So instead of criticizing and minimizing, what I want to do is empathize. And so instead of criticize, I'm going to empathize. And I'm going to say with curiosity, like, I just said movies and you got excited. And then I said no popcorn. And it looks like you're sad or disappointed. Do I have that right? And he's like, yeah. And then he tells me last time we got popcorn, and I love movie popcorn. We don't get it very often. And I can say, yeah, when we want something or hope for something and it doesn't happen, we can feel disappointed. That's what happens sometimes. And we're not going to get the popcorn, but I'm still happy to take you to the movies. And so in that moment, I'm validating his experience in a way that feels good to him. Yeah, sometimes we feel that way when we don't get what we want. And it's okay. You can feel two things at once. You can feel grateful that we're getting to go to the movies and excited, and you can feel disappointed that you're not getting popcorn. And that's okay to feel any of those things. And I can handle your big feelings, and I know you can handle your big feelings. So I think that's really important to keep in mind, is that the way we respond does give them a rep about how safe they feel really sharing themselves with us.
Whew. And you said it earlier, because we all want to feel really good. And as parents, you want to be like, you're right, I'm going to get you that popcorn because that feels a lot better in my body that you're happy. Or if that's a value to you as a parent. And for me, I think I was raised in a family where my mom and dad were really focused on if we were happy. Like, are you happy? Like, it was a very like Disneyland-esque childhood, in that it was always really fun. And then we got to high school, and my mom laid down the law, and got really strict, and we're like, who are you? Oh, it was kind of crazy, but it is definitely in my DNA to not want to have a hard boundary, and just knowing like two things can be true, and being able to have that talk track. Cause it is more important to me, not that he's happy and not that I'm saying yes and appeasing every request, but more that he feels comfortable telling me how he's feeling, especially when it's not just happy. Like, I don't, if something's not going well, I want to know about it. I definitely don't want to break our connection so that he feels grounded or rooted or anchored, or however you want to say it. Like, I want him to feel those feelings, and just like having your work and knowing that I can have boundaries, and even when they don't feel great to me, hold true to them, because ultimately in my brain, I'm thinking like, I want Sebastian being a nutritionist and loving food, and like knowing what healthy food can do to his brain and body. Like, I want to follow through with those boundaries. I don't want to give up those boundaries. And I feel a responsibility to show even my audience how to do that. And I can only do that with your work, and just having that, whether you call it a script or not, but just knowing in my brain that like, I can talk that through with my kids.
And having those boundaries, people misunderstand my work sometimes, because Dan Siegel and I, who is my co-author, we really are all about emotionally tuning in and saying yes to their experiences, and the 4 S's from the power of showing up, of helping them feel safe and seen, and co-regulating or soothing them, and helping them feel secure that you'll keep showing up for them and being there at their worst. Don't confuse that with not having boundaries.
Yeah.
Because, and we wrote about this a lot in No Drama Discipline, but when we give our kids boundaries and we say no, it actually helps them feel so much safer. Dan has this great analogy of, you think about riding your bike, a wobbly bike, across a really narrow bridge. If there are no rails, you have to be so careful, and it's anxiety producing. But if there are rails on that narrow bridge, you can just ride across and be free. We give our kids tremendous freedom and senses of safety when we have boundaries. And I think, the way that our children learn to be resilient and to deal with difficult emotions and difficult circumstances is by letting them get reps doing it when the stakes aren't so big, right? So, when we let him feel disappointed about not getting something, or the TV show being over, so I kind of have this formula that's like, adversity without support can lead to fragility, but adversity plus support and connection leads to resilience, because then your kid gets a rep of sitting in the discomfort of feeling disappointment and knowing he made it through on the other side, and he's not going to lose your love. You could handle that big feeling. So now he doesn't have to worry he's got to take care of you or protect you from his feelings, that you've got him. Mm-hmm. I'm getting ready to talk to a bunch of high schoolers later this week. And one of the messages I'm going to be talking to them about is, our society somehow has come to believe that any negative emotion, like anxiety or disappointment or sadness or embarrassment, means something's wrong. But those are part of the whole range of human emotion. And when we protect our children from negative feelings, we are not doing them any favors. And we can allow them to feel those negative feelings and then soothe them and co-regulate co-regulate with them in those moments. And just by doing that, so let's say your son's having a really hard time about the show, and you're like, I know, buddy, that's so hard. I'm right here with you. What do you need? Just by showing up in that way in the moment, you are giving his brain, you are doing tremendous brain building, because you're regulating his nervous system, giving him a rep of going from a dysregulated state back to a regulated state. It's not indulgent. It's not spoiling him. In fact, it's the opposite. It is building his capacity to be independent. The way we learn to self-soothe is by someone soothing us and co-regulating. And you know what? I have kids in college, and they need it a lot more when they're younger. But when my kid calls me and he's super stressed about something, I want to immediately go to, well, you should have started studying earlier. You should have budgeted better this month. You know, I immediately want to go to those things. But I don't have to do those things because they already know all of that. What I can do instead is say, wow, that sounds really stressful. How can I help? Or what's your plan? Right? So we can really just, and I'll say one other thing and then I'll pause. I used to spend when my older kids were younger, I used to spend so much mental and emotional energy in the moment. Let's say it's a bedtime meltdown. I would spend so much mental and emotional energy trying to figure out, what do I do? What do I say? How do I fix this? How do I get them to go to bed? How do I get the hell out of here? I'm dying for bedtime to be over. You know, and I spent all this energy trying to get through it and figure it out. And I realized as time went on, and as I came to understand the nervous system better, I didn't have to do any of that. So by the time like my third, you know, he's 8 or 10, having a massive meltdown because he has to go to bed. I'm really, really strict about sleep. Even my teenagers, strict about sleep. He didn't get to stay up as late as the older brothers. And so it was time for him to go to bed. I said, it's time to go to bed. And he's like a fish out of water, flopping because he's so flopping. And I'm in the bed with the books ready to like do our bedtime routine. And all I really have to do is say, oh, buddy, you look so upset, and pause. And then he's like, yes, it's not fair. And I'm like, it's so hard when it feels unfair, isn't it? He's like, yes. And then I say, I know, buddy. And I'm right here with you while you're feeling it. Full stop. So that's a script I use all the time. I'm right here with you while you're feeling that. And I just wait and I pause, and his nervous system starts to settle. And then I say, let me know when you're ready to read, or if there's something else you need. And usually the transition is like, okay, fine, read. And he'll come over and kind of snuggle into me, but kind of aggressively first.
Yeah.
And as I start to read, he'll soften, right? But it's really just that idea of saying, you're having a hard time. I see that. And I'm right here with you. And it's that simple. And I know just by doing that, I'm building his brain to be able to do that for himself. And so that is discipline.
Yeah. Well, oh, thank you. Thank you for that, because I'm going to use that. I'm going to full stop at the end of that. And I know I'll probably talk track that for the next years until high school. And even when I get the calls from college. Mm-hmm. I want to go back to something that you said earlier. And I want to bring in the example of Bash having a hard time with drop off, because I do want him to feel resilient. I want him to have adversity, feel secure and safe, and come out on the other end knowing he can self-soothe later in life. Drop off obviously this year was a lot harder. And I know this is something that young moms have to deal with preschool kids. I mean, you see them hanging on mom's legs at preschool drop off. And then the tears like continue, and it's so heart-wrenching. Right. I felt like, oh, this like really doesn't feel good. He never acted this way. I don't know what's going on. I immediately go to self-blame, because being the full-time working mom, and reading all the parenting books where you have to quote unquote be perfect and get it right. And I don't feel like your books are telling me to be perfect.
Please don't.
As parents, we want to show up for our kids. We don't want to mess up our kids, or all the things that we think about as parents. Right. It didn't feel good to me. And so I talked to the head of the preschool, and they are constantly looking for volunteers at recess and at lunch. And, I take podcasts on Tuesdays. I do really long days on the days that Sebastian's in school because he's in a long day of school on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I'm like, great. I've had these people on my list on my calendar forever. I'm canceling and rescheduling them. And I'm like, I feel like I need to be there and volunteer at recess and at lunch and just be there. And so I did that. I went the first 2 or 3 weeks and was able to do a lunch one day and a recess the next Thursday and then a lunch and a recess. And we sort of talked it through in the car. I'm not going to be able to do this forever. I definitely want to volunteer on holiday days and things. That just seems like you're having a hard time. It's a new school. It's a new teacher. It's a new group of kids. I'm the only parent who is volunteering at this point. And that's something that my mom used to do for me. I was really grateful for that. But I also don't want to be a snowplow. And I don't want to totally, because I think I don't want to repeat keeping adversity away from my kids, because I do feel like when I did have adversity later in life, in high school, college, it felt really hard and unmanageable. So I'm at this sticky point where I'm like, now I need your expertise. Am I snow plowing and hand holding too much? Am I what's the right response there? I haven't volunteered in the classroom now in October. It's been 2 weeks of not being on campus, dropping off in the morning and picking him up. And it's hard. This morning on the way there, he's like, I don't want to go. It's such a long day. He can verbalize that to me, which it feels really good. And I want to be it's only 20 minutes longer than your last school. It's not excessively longer, but it feels a lot longer to him. And I want to acknowledge that, but I'm also how do we do this? Because again, there's this big problem with parents being snow plows, doing everything for their kids. And then their kids wake up one day and go I don't even know who I am or what I want, because my parents have moved every adversity out of my life. Yeah. Tell me.
So I have so many things to say. First of all, he's little. It's okay for you to be there for him and to help him make that transition. Okay. So let's start there. The next thing I would say is I am kind of a control freak, and I feel like I can do things better than a lot of other people can do it. So I'm going to get in and do it. It's exhausting and it's annoying to other people. I know I annoy other people with it.
Yeah.
What I try to do is, when I'm trying to decide, am I doing too much for my kid? Or is this okay? Is this helpful? This isn't the only way to evaluate it. But one thing that helps me is to ask, am I doing this? If I'm really honest with myself, am I doing this for myself so that I don't have to sit in the uncomfortable feeling of fill in the blank?
Tears that drop off.
Exactly.
Because he knows I'm back at recess.
Exactly. Or am I doing this that is going to scaffold my child's development in some way, right? So that's where we kind of have to, and you can lie to yourself and be like, no, this helps my kid. But what I'm saying is a really honest, internal conversation with yourself. Now, the other thing I will say is that we've said this a million times, but let's apply it here. The brain is an association machine. So when he has these reps of going to school, he is having built how he feels about being at school, how he feels about being a learner, how he feels about being away from home. And so every kid is different. Every kid has a different, and this is Dan Siegel's beautiful phrase, what is our window of tolerance? What is he able to handle? And that changes. His window of tolerance was wider last year for separation than it is this year. It's not solid. It's changing all the time. My window of tolerance is a lot wider when I've had sleep, right? Et cetera. So we're really kind of monitoring that. And so for me, when you volunteer in the classroom, you're his best tool and strategy to feel regulated. Mm-hmm. So right now he's having these authentic feelings of separation anxiety. It's at the beginning of a new school year. Sounds like it's a new school. Mm-hmm. And so when you're there, what you're doing is giving him reps of feeling regulated at school. Okay. So you're laying in, these repeated experiences as he's building, as his window of tolerance expands once he's making the transition. Now, I can tell you stories of actual situations that I am privy to and have been observant of and intervened in. A mom who climbed a tree to look into kindergarten every day of the first week because she just was so worried about her daughter and so curious, fell out of the tree and broke her arm. Like that's clearly too much, right? But there's a lot of gray area in there. So I think if you start showing up every day and you're volunteering every single day and you're accidentally giving him the message, like you clearly can't be at school without mommy.
Yeah.
And keep in mind too, one of the hugest things that talk about this implicit messaging we give to our kids is if you're worried about your kid, they pick up on that. They are the most savvy of all detectives. So you need to really, in a way, kind of make sure that you're not communicating, I'm not sure you can handle this. I feel anxiety about this. You need to literally like center yourself before it's time for all that drop-off stuff and say, I want my kid to feel confident and competent about that drop-off. And I set the tone. He is going to mirror my state. So I'm going to say, I know it's a long day. So we're going to validate his feelings, right? It's a long day. It's hard to have the goodbye, isn't it? And I know you can do it. So you can validate the feeling. You don't want to sunshine it. Like, no, you love school. Remember all your friends and you bring this nervous I do it.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm nodding.
To convince him about how great it is. That's not helpful. What you actually want, because then they go, she doesn't get me, or she's so worried she's convincing herself. So what we want them to have from us in any time is that their internal experience and how you respond matches and then helps settle. So one other thing I'll say though, this association machine thing is huge for us to get as parents. Parents will tell me like, I can't get my 2-year-old to sit through dinner. I want them to sit and for us to have a nice family dinner. So we're going to teach them those manners from the very beginning. But what happens then is the parents' rigid commitment to that desire for their 2-year-old means they're having tons of battles all the way through the meal. Sit back down. You need to stay. You were not done eating yet. So the kid's getting all these reps about how unpleasant mealtime is. So What are they going to do? They're going to fight against it. So anytime we're making decisions about helping our kids get used to something or build a skill or have manners around something, any of that, we want to know, what are we communicating? What kind of reps are they getting? We want it to be, if bedtime is full of stress and fighting, they're going to avoid bedtime. Mm-hmm. If we make it yummy and fun and playful and, play games with them before you start the thing, make a competition about something, be silly, like making it fun makes them want to do it. Making it unpleasant makes them not want to do it. We're all like that, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's another thing to keep in mind. Now, one other quick thing, skill building. I would again say, I've noticed the drop-offs are hard. What are you noticing? Tell me about your experience. So you bring curiosity. That's giving him reps of saying, okay, I'm going to be curious about what I'm feeling and what might help me, right? And then you can try a couple of things. And I've got some on my website, which is tinabryson.com. I've got all kinds of videos on there about kids' anxiety about school. So you can just go and read those or watch those. But one of the strategies I've used a lot as a therapist and as a mom is when kids have anxiety about something, so ask him if he has any ideas. Sometimes what the goodbye hard part is about is different from what we think. I had this mom who came to me, she had a 3-year-old, major separation anxiety at school drop off, had never had it before. She's like, he's going through this whole bout of separation anxiety. And I said, have you ever asked him, what's the hard part about the goodbye? What's hard about the goodbye for you? She said, no, I never thought to ask him. So she went and asked him. He was not even experiencing separation anxiety. He said, my teacher's voice is too loud when she says good morning and she squeezes me too hard. That overwhelms his little nervous system. So instead, the teacher lowered her volume and did a fist bump with him. No more separation anxiety. So ask them what's the worst part, of the part you're most worried about, and then empower him. Ask him. I've used this all the time. What is the bravest animal you know? Okay. So, and kids come up with weird answers.
They're like an elephant.
Yeah. Like an eagle's the bravest. I'm like, great, let's go with it. So I had mom order, you can order temporary tattoos of anything on Etsy, and you order some temporary eagle tattoos. And you say, you know what, on days when you're wanting to feel braver, we can put on this, and especially at the beginning of something, the first couple of months of school. My kid did, we didn't do the brave thing, but he loved the dog. We're big Dodgers fans. So he had a temporary Dodgers tattoo on, and we did Name It to Tame It. We wrote an actual story from Whole Brain Child. And basically the book I made it on Word. I stole images off the website of the school. And it was basically naming what was going to happen and how he was going to feel about it, and giving him a message of resilience, naming what's happening, what is his felt experience, and what is the solution, or what's a way we can feel empowered. So I would say, what does JP do when he goes to school, right? Sometimes JP will miss mom and dad when he's at school. Okay. And we talk about that in the story. And then the last part is, and you don't have to make a book, you can just do it verbally, is to say, if you're missing mom and dad, or if the goodbye is hard, you can look at your Dodgers tattoo, and that will remind you that mom and dad will be there soon, and your teacher will always help you. So you tell the story, you name it to tame it, you give the tattoo or something that's a reminder for them, that gives them that feeling of, oh yeah, we already talked about this, I can do this.
Oh, I love it. It reminds me of the kissing hand, and I have
Yes.
a heart on my hand right
yeah.
now because we had to do that this morning. But it is amazing how kids, even just like putting something on their little body, or like them knowing that like you have a tattoo and they have a tattoo, or you have a heart and they have a heart, like all of a sudden he was just like kind of back to that place of like, I don't want to go. And it's so far away from like Thursday all the way around to the next Tuesday. That like 4-day gap feels longer than the previous Friday to Monday of last year too. And it's just like, it
sounds like he's tolerating it really well in circumstances where the anxiety is really intense and the kid starts then really wanting to avoid and it becomes big. I recommend shorten the day. So basically, you think about what is the demand of the situation and what is his capacity. And when there's a huge gap between the demand and the capacity, it doesn't sound like there is. There's a tiny little baby gap here. So you're going to build his capacity so there won't be a gap there, right? And as the transition of the year happens, further in, he'll be fine. But when there's a huge gap there, sometimes as you're building skills, you do need to reduce the demand for a period of time so that they get those positive reps and they feel like they can do this. So sometimes just shortening the day 20 minutes, and they knowing I'll pick you up earlier, then they kind of get into the rhythm. It feels good. Then they're not avoiding it as much. Then you can extend the time over time.
It just reminds me of working out. It makes perfect sense. You're like not going to throw someone into a 90-minute Barry's boot camp style workout if they haven't worked out. You're going to go like, let's do 20 minutes where you feel strong and empowered and you want to do this again.
Exactly.
I love that. So let's talk about some of your hard boundaries. I know that we're getting close to time here, but you said sleep was a super hard boundary. We have sleep struggles, but I know how important sleep is for their brain development and their ability to regulate their emotions. I also know how sugar impacts that. So I have boundaries there, but talk to me about what are some of your hard boundaries and why. And then if we can, I'd like to close it up on something you mentioned earlier, which is a little bit of a interesting topic for me, which is that it feels like the pendulum went from all of our parents being external validation of like, good job, that's great, you got straight A's, you got in this Ivy League school, you scored a goal, great job, great job, great job, kind of like external validation, to now the pendulum swings all the way over here where we're like not going to tell our kids that they're pretty or handsome, we're not going to say good job at all anymore. And I mean, I'm going to tell you, like, that's learned from my childhood. So like, all I want to do is tell my kids that they're adorable, hug them, squeeze them, attack of the kisses. You're so good. Good job. Like, it's really hard to turn that off. So let's talk about your
turn it all the way off.
Okay.
Just temper it. You can tell them they're amazing and all of that too.
Okay. So can we talk about your hard boundaries and then how maybe not a script, but like around good job and all the kind of like external.
So I think I would say, number one is everybody has to feel safe and we respect each other. That's number one. Relationships are number one in our family. And it's okay. I might criticize my kid and be disrespectful to them, or they might be to me, but we always are going to repair. We're always going to say, you know what? I wish I had handled that differently. Will you forgive me? Can I have a do-over? Right? So we take responsibility for that. So if my kid's really disrespectful in the moment, I might either say, it's not okay for you to talk to me that way. I don't let anybody talk to me that way. So I can either help you calm down, or we can take a break and I'll come check on you in a few minutes. Or I might say, oh, buddy, you're so angry. What's happening? Come here. Because the minute he's regulated, he's going to say, sorry, I said that earlier, mom. Right? Because kids do well when they can, right?
Yeah.
So, so respect relationships, being connected to each other. So family dinner almost every night, even through, it might even be a quick Chipotle, whatever, if we have to. Most nights, even, and with 3 boys and sports and all of that, it was challenging, but
Yeah.
most nights of the week we had dinner together. And sleep. And we do definitely have boundaries around sugar and junk food and stuff, but sleep is so crucial, and I'm the worst at it, because I have so much I want to get done. And I love TV too. So after everybody goes to bed, I'm working and watching TV. But it's so crucial because we know that it's during sleep that the janitorial crew comes and cleans up the toxins in our brains. It's crucial for brain development, for our window of tolerance the next day, our ability to be respectful to each other the next day. So even when my kids were in high school, but we can start doing this even earlier. My kids had hard and fast bedtimes, but even my 16-year-old, now I'll say, he is typically, and this is very unusual for teenagers, in bed, turning off lights, 9:30, 10.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah. And they have a late start school too, which is great. They don't start till 8:30. But what will happen is I don't want my kid to be 18 and leaving to go to college the next month and me still telling him to go to bed. So the way I handle that, and there are lots of people who write about this. Christine Carter writes about this in her book, The New Adolescence, but I've done this for a really long time as well, is to say, it's getting late. I know you know how important it is to get sleep. What is your plan? And so you start having them get the reps in to be thinking about how late it is and what do I still need to get done. And I actually use that phrase even with 4-year-olds. What's your plan? It's time. We need to get ready soon. What's your plan? And so you're asking them to participate in kind of that metacognitive skill of monitoring where they are in space, what else needs to happen, et cetera. So those are the main ones.
Oh, I love it. What's your plan? What's your plan?
Yeah. And you know what? They'll start asking you. They'll be like, Mom, we need to, whatever. What's your plan? They'll start.
I'm cool with it. I'll let them know. They always want to know what the plan is. Okay. So tell me how I temper my, just almost automatic reaction to my kids just wanting to praise them 24/7.
I mean,
about everything.
Yeah. Dr. Lisa Pressman and I did a podcast talking about this very thing, that parents think you're like, there's so much noise out there about advice for parents, right? And we have all this amazing science and research to base a lot of this on, but there's a lot of noise out there, so much advice. And honestly, when you talk about like, what are your main boundary things, there really are only a handful of things that I think are the most important things. And avoiding praising your child is not one of the most crucial things, right? It's important to focus on the kid's process, and it's important to help them have a growth mindset. But if you throw in a good job, buddy, or, oh my gosh, you are the cutest, I can't even stand it, you are not ruining your child. I promise you, throw some of those in there. That's fine. As long as they also have experiences of, why did you choose that color? Or, oh, tell me about your art, right? You're having those kinds of conversations instead. And we want to be really careful too. We should not, especially little girls, people are like, you're so pretty. We want to ask them like, what books do you like? Right. We want to ask little boys, like, who's your favorite friend that you love to be good friends with? Like, relational kinds of things. Cause we tend to talk about relationships and emotions more with little girls and not so much with boys, and boys are falling behind in lots of those ways. So we want to be thoughtful about those things. So temper it, but you don't have to be perfect around that. What we really need to do, what I think is the number one most important thing for us to hold on to, is really what your kids need most from you is you. Flawed you, imperfect you, who sometimes has to repair you, but you, and you delighting in them. If that comes out as, oh my God, you're so cute, I can't stand it, or wow, that's the most amazing drawing I've ever seen. If it comes out like that way, sometimes what you're doing in that moment is delighting in your child. And I actually think that is, we know from the science that delighting in our children is a huge benefit for them in terms of who they turn out to be. If, delighting in them also, it looks like, tell me about why you chose, tell me about your picture. I'm so curious, that kind of thing. Delighting in them, showing up for them when they're at their worst, that's when they need us the most. but you and your relationship with them and showing up and being that safe place for them, no matter what's happening in the world, that is the most important thing. And we're going to be flawed and they're going to be flawed. But at the end of the day, that's what matters most.
You make us all feel like better parents, and you're giving us the tools from the research, which I really respect, in a way that is approachable and doesn't feel overwhelming, and actually really feels good. So thank you so much for all of the work that you've done over all of these years. I mean, I can't believe it's got to be 10 years now for The Whole Brain Child, published in 2012.
It came out. Yes. It's over 10 years old now. Yep.
Wow. You have been.
Trauma Discipline is like 8 years old. And really that book was all about kind of shaking up and rethinking. One of our titles was actually going to be called Rethinking Discipline, and the word think in big letters. That book is really about a big lens shift. And there are lots of other people doing that as well. And that's great. We really need to all work together in this revolution to change how we see and respond to kids' behaviors. And there's a lot of work to be done there. So,
well, thank you for paving the way with all of your books and teaching us how to really work on our relationship and create that secure attachment with our kids. Because I know everyone listening is probably looking exactly for that from you and have probably read one of your books. So thank you so much for all of it, all the information. Where can people follow along? Instagram, your website? What are you doing? How are you connecting? I know you're doing a lot of consulting now too for big, super big, awesome companies and things of that nature. So, but where can we follow along and learn more?
My website is tinabryson.com, and that's Bryson. And I'm on all social media. And usually my handle on there is Tina Payne Bryson, Payne. And there's a ton of free content out there. So yes, buy the books. And we didn't get to talk about The Bottom Line for Baby today. That's a book I'm so proud of because it's the book I wanted most as a new parent and still didn't exist all these years later. But it's the kind of book where it's really 65 of the most controversial topics that you get the most competing advice about. And you can alphabetically turn to sleep training or pacifiers or baby-led weaning or whatever it is. And each entry has, here are the main competing arguments. Here's what the science says, and it gives a bottom line. And then in about a third of the entries, I weigh in with my notes on it or my opinion, because I wanted to keep it really clean in terms of what the science says. But sometimes I disagree with the science. So that's why I had to put some notes from Tina in there as well. But it's a book that allows parents to get informed within a couple of minutes and then feel empowered to do what feels right for their family. To show their mother-in-law, see, it's okay that I licked my kid's pacifier clean because I'm giving them really good like biome, whatever. So you can kind of use it to defend your choices as well. But really the main point of the book is to help parents feel better about trusting themselves and trusting their babies and being informed to do what works well for them. So that's a book that's my newest book, and I'm really proud of that one right now. But yes, please find me because there's so much free content out there. My life's work is to really connect with other parents and embolden us to know that we're better parents than we think we are, and then also to do better.
Oh, well, I'm going to go grab The Bottom Line for Baby because fingers crossed, prayers up. We'll have another one. And I want to just see what you have to say about all those things from screens to sleep training. That's what I'm going to go check out next.
Awesome.
Thank you, Tina, for being here. Such a pleasure to have you on the show. Finally nailed you down. I'm so excited about it.
I'm happy to come back anytime. You are a delight. And I'm so appreciative of all the amazing work you're doing to help us all be better as well.
Thanks. All right.